Hey everyone, and welcome to Taking Your Pitch to the Next Level, our live Q&A with Carlo Moss. I'm your host and the director of Catalyst Story Institute, Nikki Coble. And Carlo is a writer, producer, and executive, best known for his hit stop motion series, The Most Popular Girls in School. He's also the CEO of Maranty Media, the startup that he founded in order to demystify the art of pitching for creators in all genres. Some of you may also know him either from the festival this year at Pitch World or through our Pitch World series in the Institute. Thanks for being here, Carlo.
Thank you so much for having me, Nikki.
We always love getting to chat with you. I mean, I feel like it's just a bunch of gems that we just keep trying to receive and shove them in a bag and take them with us as we
Well,
travel forward in our
as
pitching
long as
journey.
as long as people are as long as people are still receptive to it, I'll keep tossing them in that bag.
Absolutely.
You
Well, and I
know?
know you did another series for us that we're referencing that was a six-part series and was phenomenal that everybody is still devouring and has quite a few views for us on YouTube. What did we cover in that? Yeah, he's like, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
right. Did it. I did it.
did it. I
Uh,
landed, Mom.
yeah.
So great.
Yeah, that first series was largely starting from the ground up, helping our audience understand what is pitching, what needs to go into a TV pitch, really hitting the building blocks of how to structure your pitch and how to go from I have an idea in my head to I am in a room with executives pitching this TV show, making it into an actual tangible thing. Walking through
Absolutely.
each element of the pitch, like just really getting into the nitty gritty of the detail. And this next series that we're going to be launching is largely focused on, like it says right there, the next level. What happens when you've been in a few rooms, when you've been pitching for a while? How do you up level your pitch skills? And also how do you look out for common mistakes that happen when you've been doing this for a while? So,
Yeah.
really focusing on graduating from being a beginner pitcher to a working professional.
hmm hmm And because we're live, we welcome anybody at home who wants to ask Carlo any questions about the things that they have gray areas about for pitching. We would love your input because as we make this new series to come out slightly after Passover in the spring, as we make this to come out, we want to know what it is that you're missing. We want to have your input. So feel free if you'd like to have your picture and your name pop up through Facebook, please go to streamyard.com/Facebook on another tab, just so you can give it permission to share your name and that way we'll know who we're talking to. But by all means, jump in the comments and ask us your questions. We are ready for you. In the meantime, Carlo, what would you say are some of the common mistakes that people make? How can you
Yeah,
tell
so
an experienced person from an inexperienced person?
totally. So, one of the things I've been observing a lot, because I both pitch on a regular basis and then also work with creators of all experience levels, from people hitting their first pitch to people who have been in this for 20 years pitching. Some of the things that I observe, like when you're in that kind of middle zone, when you're going from beginning to a veteran, uh, the thing that I say is I find creators building bridges to nowhere. It's a really common thing, especially if you're familiar with the show that you're pitching. You've been doing it for a while. You start to get a
Mhm.
little bit bored. It ends up being this thing where you go, I've got this script, but for some reason I want to deviate from it just a little bit because I'm sick of the sound of my own voice, right?
Yeah.
You've gone through, five or six different pitches to networks or producers. You're sick of hearing it said the same way. So just off the cuff, you start saying something different and realize, oh, that was worded very specifically. And now I've hit literally a bridge to nowhere because I can't finish my sentence. You know
Oh,
what I what yeah what I said. You're getting bored with what you're going to say and how you're going to say it because you've said it so many times.
mhm. Yeah. And then you're just stuck out there treading
And you're like,
water, waiting for
anyway,
anyone to save you. Yeah. Very
exactly. And it really becomes a problem when you're pitching with partners, because a lot of times the bridge that you're building is actually the setup line or the cue for your partner to come in. And so now you're not only screwing yourself up, you're screwing up that partner.
Mhm. Nothing worse than
Yeah,
both being screwed
exactly.
up. They're like, "Where did you go, dude?
Right?
Why were you so excited?" Because that's something that people don't think about, right? When we get excited about our show, we talk to friends about it, we talk to our family about it, we've talked it to death, and we could talk about it from this angle, that angle. But when there is an opportunity in the room, when you smell that there's something to get, sometimes our adrenaline, that nervous energy, whether we love it and we're thriving or whether we absolutely hate having to speak publicly, that adrenaline is going to kick in and it's going to mess with your flow. And I think that's something
Absolutely.
people don't necessarily take it into account, is that it's going to kind of derail you into starting to riff and losing your
Yep.
place.
Yep. It's the thing that I always liken to is you want to have the mindset of a stand-up comic as opposed to an improviser in that
Mm,
moment. I say this fully as somebody with an improv background who sucked at stand-up, but a stand-up comedian gets used to I hit this note every time, I hit this joke like this, boom, 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 because I know how that works. And that's what you need in pitching. Whereas an
mhm.
improviser, is going to be ready for anything, but also part of the appeal of improv is it's constantly changing, it's constantly novel. And so you want to have that mindset of the stand up who's like, I did my homework. I structured this out. I know how it works. I'm not going to change anything. I'm not going to mess with the formula here.
And certainly if they ask you a question and you need to pivot and cover tone a little heavier and then circle back to character or whatever it is, if there's a reason where they're asking you to go deeper into one thing and then cut to something else, you have to know it well enough that you know what each of those pieces is to be
Absolutely.
able to kind of cover it. But you don't want to get yourself meandering and, oh wait, did I cover that? Oh wait, oh no, wait, actually that other thing I forgot to tell you. That just becomes very uncomfortable for everyone in the room. Certainly.
Exactly. The time when you want to be thinking like an improviser is after your pitch when they're asking you questions. That's when you want to be nimble on your feet, ready for anything, able to handle anything that comes at you. But when
Mhm.
you're in the middle of your pitch, because especially more and more over the last few years, I've observed that there are very few times when a pitch really is a conversation where you're getting interrupted with questions. Usually, there's kind of this understanding now with executives and creators of you prep something, give it to me. I'm going to write notes and I'm going to ask you about it afterwards.
Mhm. Mhm. Right. Right. If you're just tuning in now for the first time, we would love to hear your questions. If you have any questions for Carlo, please go to streamyard.com/Facebook on another tab if you can, just to give your permission, or ask your question straight away. We won't know who's asking, but we'll certainly be able to answer it either way. We would love to hear from you because Carlo is again building a new series for us for pitching to kind of take everything to the next level. So we're super excited to bring that to you, and we want your input as we put that together. Carlo, are there any other common mistakes that people make in that
Yeah,
scenario besides the bridge to nowhere?
absolutely. Another one that I notice a lot is what I call insisting on being understood.
Mm,
And it's the type of thing that I observe all the time in creatives across the board, but especially when it comes to pitching, and especially when you're in that middle ground of having pitched before, having that experience. Insisting on being understood leads to a lot of over explaining.
right.
It's, hey, I have this idea. I want to make sure that you get it because it's really brilliant and really good, and
Mhm.
I'm going to keep talking about it until I know for sure that you've got it. And
Yeah.
I notice a lot that it happens in that Q&A portion where you're not
Mhm.
quite sure if you got the point across just enough, when in actuality being confident enough in your own statement of I got the answer to this question, here you go, boom, period, is the strongest thing that you can hit them with.
Right. And also, I would imagine that practice, I mean, the reason why we have Pitch World at the festival, the reason why in the Institute we're about to set up our group pitch sessions again, is that everybody learns in community. And that if I run something by you, and you're obviously someone who I trust as not to steal my idea, but if this is a trusted friend, somebody who's in your circle, that I could go to you and say, "Hey, Carlo, what do you get when I say, this meets this in a show? What are those vibes? Am I distilling this to the most potent description in my log line? What do you get from that? What do you get when I say this? Try it out." Because then you know that
Exactly.
you've really done that work and kind of looked at it from every angle to make sure that you're not going to leave anybody behind when you talk about it, so that you don't have to over explain in the room. You've researched and tested it out in your community to know that this is the best way to describe exactly what it is that you're thinking of, that you want to convey.
Yeah, Exactly. And I think that that speaks to another thing that I've been encouraging a lot of my clients with, especially when you're really at that point where you're ready to go to the next level of pitching, is learning how to speak in sound bites and practicing speaking in sound bites so that
Mhm.
when you're in there and you're pitching, you can hit that period and have the confidence to know, like, I made my point clearly. I know that everybody's got it.
Right. Because we're always looking for that just in communication anyway, whether you're meeting with representation or whether you're talking to a director about a potential series in an audition, we're always noticing the nonverbal feedback. Are they
Hmm.
squinting and they don't get it? Are they nodding along? Are they looking at their watch? Are they tapping their pen? You know, you want to distill it down to the most potent and efficient delivery so that then you can make it a dialogue because ideally it should be a dialogue, right?
Absolutely. And the thing that I always say is if you get to the point where the person on the other end of the table or the other end of the Zoom is pitching ideas back to you and coming up with their own episode ideas, that's how you know you got it. That's how you know you sold the show because you have activated the executive's imagination. That's ultimately what you're trying to do because you want to give them that creative respect too of like, hey, we're going to build this together.
Right. Because I think there's sometimes a misconception that the glorious idea that is hatched in my brain will be what we shoot and what America,
Right.
the entire world sees just as I envisioned it. And that doesn't quite happen. It goes through different filters of the director, of the writer, of the executives, of the platform that you're on. It's going to have to pass through all of those filters. And so it is going to evolve, right?
Absolutely. And I think, that a lot of the time we demonize network notes or notes from anybody who's not the original creator as this terrible, awful thing. But there are so many examples like Elaine on Seinfeld was a network note.
Mm,
And you have to go into the whole process of creating a series with the mindset of like, this is going to be collaborative. If I'm clutching onto this thing as my baby that nobody else can touch, guess what? It's not going to get made.
no, no. And it's so hard because we can revere our own genius, revere our own idea, and also be open to the fact that someone else's suggestion may improve it, may make it more
Absolutely.
compelling, may make it more relatable. So I think the more that you know your idea, trust that you have the confidence and the authority to say, oh, yes to that. And I think that not this, but that, that would be great. That you could then have the autonomy to speak to which notes fit and which don't. Maybe I didn't like the vibe at this particular I don't want to start using network names
Right.
just
Yeah.
even in my pretense of an idea, but I don't want to say that network A said, "Yeah, but can you do it in space and can you make it, an all male cast and can you do this?" And you go, "I don't think that quite fits." But this other platform had these other ideas and I guess I could see my way into that. You do have the authority to make those decisions. If you
Exactly. And right. And I think that that speaks to a huge part of what taking your pitch to the next level like is all about is finding that sweet spot of having a clear vision that you are able to communicate concisely while also being the type of person that an exec wants to work with, that a network wants to work with, that knows how to collaborate because we're working in a collaborative medium. It's not going to be you're not going to be a dictator in this
right, exactly.
process. You're going to be way high up there creatively, getting to make a lot of important decisions. But if it's my way or the highway, like that doesn't work. And you want that sweet spot of having clear vision
Mhm.
while also being conveying to that person in the room like I know how to work with other people. And that was one thing that I saw a lot like in my exec days was I would either get to me who were completely rigid on everything and like no, it has to be this way, and I'd be like all right, cool, well, we're not going to be picking up your show. Or it would be the other way, people trying too hard to be agreeable, where I would ask them like what's the best version of this show? Like, is it a 15 or is it a 30 or is it an hour long? And getting answers like, I mean, whatever you want.
Right.
I can format this thing anyway. I'm like, I know that. I know that I'm holding the purse strings, and if I give you, X amount of money, you're gonna, make whatever fits in our network demand. But what's your vision for it? What's the
Yeah.
best version of this? That's what I want to know now. And it's
Yeah,
finding that sweet spot where you've got that vision, but you're also able to work with others.
you're absolutely right, because I think that your clarity brings them to you, I think. I wanna say it was Jeffrey Lieber who, I heard do a talk before, who was kinda saying, "You have to help them know what they want because they don't know." And the clearer
Absolutely.
that you are, they can say, "Ooh, yes, that," or, "Oh, no, not that. That doesn't fit our vision." But when you kind of say, "It could be this, it could also be in space, we could also have it be teenagers and make it YA." If
Right.
you're that open to it, then you're not a rudder that they can follow.
Yeah, and that's we talked about this a little bit in the first round of classes that we did, but what that actually tells an executive is I have not yet done the hard work and made the hard decisions of saying it's this and not this, because
Yeah.
that is legitimately a painful experience to
Mhm.
kill some of the potential ideas that you have sitting there of going, no, this is what the show is. It's not this.
Right. And it's so hard because I know there's a lot of creators who are making their own work, their own content, because they're looking for their own acting opportunities or they're looking for directing opportunities. And everybody would love to kind of jump to that level where they're getting a really nice paycheck to be on that level. But the tough news is, the tough pill to swallow is, if you're not ready to get notes from your friends or your trusted circle, you're not ready to take it to executives, because it is a team sport. Other people are
Absolutely.
going to give you feedback, and you have to either say yes or no, but it can't just be this or nothing, because it
Exactly.
will.
Yep. And it becomes very clear from an executive standpoint if you're working with somebody who views every executive no as you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
And I've dealt with that type of person on both sides of the table when I've been an executive having to deal with that headache of a creator, or when I've been a writer, creator, either being that person when I was younger where you're
yeah.
like, oh, more executive notes, more network notes. I'm the creative. I know what I'm talking about. And it's like, guess what? You don't know everything. Like,
Yeah,
a lot, plenty of these people know what the hell they're doing. In fact, most of them do. That's why they're doing that. And
mhm,
the number of network notes that you get that are there just for the sake of somebody's job, like it's not as much as you think.
right,
I think that that's a pretty you know predominant kind of like feeling is, oh, most of these notes are just people trying to justify their job, and it's like sometimes that's true, but if you're going in with that mindset, you're going to miss the notes that actually make your show better. You're going to miss the Elaine
right.
note.
Yeah, it is a collaboration, it wants to be a dialogue. Certainly, you come prepared to engage in a dialogue about what the show could be, which might
Hmm.
be even better than what you did all by yourself in the cave
Right.
of your apartment, right? And
Exactly.
lived in your head, right? It could be better. And so that's the kind of journey, is to get to that sweet spot, like you said, of that middle ground of being so confident and so competent and having done all that work, to then be open to changing certain pieces to improve it and to make
Right.
it fit what you all could do together. That's really awesome.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think the other thing that we take for granted that happens in the course of that dialogue of showing yourself to be somebody who's willing to play ball, who's willing to collaborate with others, is pitching is a lot about relationships.
Mhm.
When I go into a pitch now, I know, especially if I'm pitching animation, like I know those executives really well. So they know that if they have a particular mandate they're trying to hit and the show I'm pitching them might fit into it with a little bit of tweaking, I'm down to figure out how that can happen so that we can make
Right,
something together. You're
right,
building that reputation, and it's really easy to get a reputation of, oh, this guy sucks. Oh,
right,
this guy's way too obsessed with his own ideas. Like,
right.
let's go ahead and pick something else up.
Because ultimately, the goal is for you to have a trunk full of ideas, not to throw at anybody at any given point, but to say, "Oh, if it's not that, I actually have a modern costume drama that can set." I don't know if that
Exactly.
actually tracks, but if I have a modern costume drama, it's funny you should mention that, because here's this other idea, or, "Yep, oh, I also have this." That it can't just be the one precious, like, column that you're trying to see through to the finish line. It's gotta be that you've got a circuit of ideas, and in your portfolio, they could find something that fits them, because in the middle of your dialogue, they're investing in you as a collaborator.
Exactly. And, it reminds me of a story that I tell a lot when Most Popular Girls in School first hit. I got a big agent. They sent me on a bunch of what they call the water bottle tours, where you get a water bottle from every studio. You get a
Yeah.
water bottle from Paramount, a water bottle from Warner's, water bottle from like all of them.
Mhm.
And I was so unprepared going into those meetings because I figured, oh, we're going to talk about Most Popular Girls and how great that show is. And I've been working so long in my career to get to that point. And we did for about 3 minutes. And
Mhm.
then the question came up of, so what else are you working on? And I went, I should probably start working on some other stuff, huh? Because that show was already sold somewhere.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
being precious with that one idea, being like, no, this is my baby. Like, what if the place where you're going already has a similar show in development? Guess what? That's the end of that conversation if you don't have any other ideas.
Right. Right. And I think it's fair to say as long as you've done the homework, it may be that something is in an outline stage and you haven't written the script yet, but if you have a pitch ready for something that you are willing to speak about, that you could bring into that room, that counts. That's another idea
Absolutely.
that you've done the homework on. It doesn't have to be that you've gotten a full series Bible and every piece of potential paperwork or visual that they could possibly need and a proof of concept. We know that that's expensive and we know that that's a lot of energy and time, but certainly putting everything headlong into only one idea and trying to push that forward, it might end up that you don't get as many returns off of that as you might if you're bringing a portfolio to the table.
Absolutely. And the advice that I always give my clients is, pitch one thing at a time, but have other things in your back pocket so that if you're in that conversation and you're the thing that you came in to pitch or whatever, like it's not right, you can absolutely say, hey, here's an idea I'm working on. I'm not ready to pitch it to you guys, but here's the elevator pitch of it. I'll have my agent hit you back up when it's ready. Like I've had that
Absolutely.
conversation plenty of times, both sides of the table, and that's a normal conversation to have.
It's beautifully transparent and it's authentic to say, "Hey, this idea just came to me and, where it's not where I would like it to be to speak off the cuff with you, but I'd be happy to bring it back," you know, and then at least it becomes about the next steps after this meeting. We will circle back and
Hmm.
talk about another idea if you already know, right? Because there's also those people who would stay in the room until they get a yes, right? They'll
Right.
overstay their welcome, who are like, "What about this? What about this?" And you're like, "We are done here." And if you don't know that by the energy in the room, then you're going to lose an opportunity. Whereas if you had a great meeting, you might be able to follow up in a couple months and say, "Hey, I also have this great idea. You were the first person I thought of to run it by."
Exactly. You put yourself in that position to build a relationship with somebody, like the majority of creators that I talk to that are successful, like they didn't sell their thing on the first pitch, they spent the time getting good, building the relationships with the executives, and then putting themselves in a position where all of a sudden dominoes start falling.
Yep. Because their relationships over time as well. I think a lot of times it's, "Oh, I get this opportunity. Here's my script. Where's my check?" Like it's right
Right.
now. Sometimes it may be a yes, but not now. And in a few months, they might say, "Oh, Carlo, that show wasn't right for us at the time, but I really liked his energy. And we've got another animated project I think he'd be great for." So it does result in work or an opportunity, but not necessarily the one that you pitched. That can happen too.
Exactly. You never know where a relationship is going to take you, where somebody else's, where somebody else's career is going to take them, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I knew you from this place, and now you're over here, and now you have the power to, green light my show, and you already know my work. Great.
Absolutely. And it looks like we have our very first question from Joshua Reese Hopkins. When meeting with execs, how many ideas, concepts, or scripts is sufficient to have in your arsenal? And for him, he says, I don't feel I have enough developed work ready that I could keep the ball rolling if they were asking questions like that. And I think that kind of ties into what you were just saying. Are log lines enough? Is a treatment enough? What do you think?
Yeah, it all depends, and like I feel like the golden rule here is don't let perfect be the enemy of good, right?
Mhm.
Where you're sitting there being like, I'm not going to take anything out specifically because I don't have enough secondary, uh, you know, pieces of work that I can showcase just in case they ask for something else or it's not right. Like I would say if you're at that point where you've got one project that maybe you're taking out, or that's kind of like the thing that's opening you up for meetings,
Hmm.
if you have a log line, if you have an idea that you can throw out afterwards, and this is again assuming that they're not responding to that first thing, right? This is
Right.
assuming that you've gone in and you pitch and they've said, you're very rarely going to get a pass in the room. The closest thing you're going to get is like, oh, actually, we have something in development that's really similar.
Hmm.
Then you want to keep it pretty light, because like the last thing you want to do is get some kind of a pass and go, oh, but don't worry, I have other things. Like, I know you're a
Yeah.
writer, you're supposed to have other things, right? So
Right.
in that situation, like, keep things in your pocket that you're working on so that you can legitimately throw out like, oh yeah, I'm also working on this, like I'd love to send it your guys way when when I want to give it another polish, I want to give it another whatever, all of that kind of like vernacular, that little jargony type of stuff that you can throw in there to let them know, like, it's not quite ready, but I want to send it to you guys and open that door. But the big thing that I feel like holds back a lot of creators is, I don't have X, so I'm not going to do anything.
Hmm. Hmm. So do you think it's maybe like 2 to 3 ideas in your back pocket, even if they're just log lines, that you could say,
Absolutely.
yeah, I've got another one that's actually this meets this in a world of blah, 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 dystopian adventure. And I'd love to run that by you when I flesh it out a little more, you know,
I,
and leave
I,
that.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Like, and that's
Fabulous.
what you should be doing as a writer anyway, so you don't get bored with your own stuff.
Yeah.
Also, complete side note, but Josh, I know I owe you an email, and Josh is a great writer that I met at Catalyst for the first time at the actual festival.
That is
Um,
awesome. And well played.
yeah,
Well played.
right.
By the way, hello. And I
Yeah,
have a question. That's
but
great.
yeah, it's definitely that whole thing of keeping yourself from getting bored, keeping ideas in the hopper, and getting them down on paper as quickly as possible, because once they go from your head to paper, they become a lot more real.
Right. Absolutely. And that's a danger too, isn't it? And thank you, Joshua. Yes, if anybody is watching and you want to ask a question, feel free to go to streamyard.com/Facebook and just grant permission for us to see your name and your picture. That way we can know who we're talking to if you want to ask a question, or you can just be mysterious if it's dicey.
Mhm.
Thank you. He says, hey, everyone, and thanks so much. That makes sense. Thank you for joining us, Joshua. But I was going to say that is a bit of a danger too, right? Where we we want to go in and put our best foot forward because it's the opportunity. And I think the more that we can trust that we are belonging in that room and we have earned that opportunity, then we don't have it to speak from a place of lack or need to get something. It's just to go
Mhm.
see. Because didn't they used to call them go sees? Like you go on a go
I think
see.
so.
Isn't it something like that? I'm not sure if it was used for that or if it was for modeling or what, but those opportunities used to be called go-sees of like, I'm just gonna go see at Paramount. I'm gonna go see what's
Right,
up. I'm gonna go see if I vibe over there. And maybe that mentality can help us a little bit more than there is something to lose here. There is
right.
something to gain or lose in this room, in this moment.
Yeah, and I think it's worth drawing like a distinction there between like when you're going in for a pitch and speaking very specifically about one project of like, hey, we are, the title of this Zoom meeting is whatever the name of your project is where you're pitching it, versus what a lot of writers get to experience, which is that general meeting where you can throw out a few different ideas. Because in
Mhm.
that general meeting, you can sit there and go like, what I'm really excited right now, or what I saw recently that I really liked, and the genre that I've been playing in a lot lately. Like,
Mm.
that's the time for that type of conversation to happen. I when you're in the pitch meeting of a very specific show that you're pitching, that you've put all of that work into, you can keep the focus right there on a specific show, and then you'll get word a couple weeks later whether or not they're going to go with it, and there you and or your agent can continue the conversation about other projects that you have in the hopper, which is why you should always have a few in your pocket.
Of course. Yeah, and again, they could be at any stage, but certainly a solid log line and a gist of how the show would play out, and you've kind of poked some holes in what a season would be to say, "Oh, I guess that's not compelling. I'm not going to get a Game of Thrones number of seasons out of
Right.
so-and-so goes to the DMV, the musical. Like I'm not gonna be able to do that. So maybe I need to flesh this out. But once you've poked holes in those ideas, definitely just let them be conversation pieces. And I also think
Exactly.
people talk about doing your homework, about what's currently on that platform. Don't you have the right to also ask questions?
Absolutely. You
Because
know,
sometimes, you're on the spot talking about yourself and your project, but they want to participate. They want to get to know you, so you should also want to get to know them. Are there any helpful questions in that scenario?
yeah, when I was on the executive side, I always appreciated when people came in ready to have a conversation. I understand that it's a pretty nerve-wracking experience, so a lot
Yeah.
of times people would be like, "All right, here's the pitch, da 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 da, da, here's my song and dance, da 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 da."
Yeah.
But I always appreciated when somebody came in there with the energy of like, "I have this thing prepped for you, but first let's talk a little bit." Like how's
Yeah.
even if it's as simple as how's your day going, or what's going on at wherever that exec is working. Like
Yeah.
one of my best practices is to ask like, either how's everything over there? If you know that they just had a big premiere, if they just had a big show come out, you can reference that. You can throw out, "Hey, congrats on the new season of Ted Lasso or whatever." Like I watched the first episode, it's fucking awesome. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that type of stuff to show that you're a human being. That was one thing I talked about a lot in that first series was just like the executive on the other side of the table is also a person. Treat
Right.
them like that. Not Don't treat them like a slot machine where
Yeah.
you're just walking in, pulling the
Natural.
handle, and then be like, "I'll see myself out. I know you don't want to talk to me."
Oh, it's awful. So uncomfortable
Right?
because that sets the tone. That sets the tone that then makes them uncomfortable, even if you're spinning in your own juices of just like, "Oh, this is awkward." They then feel that and then go, "God, I never wanna be in a room with that person who is so uncomfortable in their own skin in my presence. Oh, I can't put that person in a writer's room. I can't bring that person to executives." It's gotta be that you have the confidence to know you're in that room, and yeah, you might be a little amped up, but you can take the focus off yourself by being curious about them too.
Exactly. And that's another reason why you should be prepping your pitches ahead of time, why you should have an outline and a structure, because it's way easier to riff up off the top and have a conversation with somebody if you know when it's time to go, what happens. But if you're sitting there and you're coming in blank and you've just like kind of rehearsed the general gist for,
Mhm.
two or three times and you're like, "Yeah, no, I can riff it. I'm good." You're going to be nervous as hell, and that small talk is going to be you sitting there being like, "Okay, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, let's start, let's start," as opposed to, "I know what my first line is. I've got an outline in front of me. Whenever it's time to go, then I can pull the old, all right, well, why don't I tell you about this show, and you guys can give me a whole bunch of money to make it or whatever, like, and you can have that fun, you can have that conversation because we're all just people."
Yeah, yeah. And again, if anybody's watching and wants to hop in with any questions, certainly we would love to hear from you. StreamYard.com/Facebook if you want to give us permission for your picture and your name to be used so we can talk to you directly. But we definitely want to hear from you. In the meantime, do people use outlines or cheat sheets, or is everybody expected to go in and just fly and not forget? Do
Oh
they
my
have
god,
their
please.
points?
That is probably the number one piece of advice that I give to people pitching is write an outline. You get no extra points for being off book,
Yeah.
whether it's on Zoom or in person. To the point where when I was pitching in person, I would always make sure that I printed out on paper my outline. And, for me, I like to script most of my pitch, just because that's like, I figured out that's the way that I work best. Some people work better off of bullet points. I
Mhm.
like to script my lines pretty down to the word because as a writer, I nerd out on rhythm. I nerd out on where this word goes, how you can play with that. So I want that language to be really particular. But the other reason behind that, and this is a point that I hit over and over again, is when you walk in and you pull out that paper, and I would always have it color coded so that the colors come through the paper,
Why are we the same person? Like,
right?
it's like, oh, that speaks to my heart. Yes.
But what that communicates is a shorthand that says, "I respect your time enough that I did my homework. I know that
Mm,
your time is valuable. I'm not going to come in here and just try to pull something off the top of my head. Your time's valuable. I did the homework. And if you invest the amount of money that is required to make a TV show in me, I'm not going to get you fired and I'm not going to waste that money
Yeah. You can
because
trust me.
exactly, because like ultimately execs are risk averse. They don't want to get fired. And that, that's oftentimes why we see a lot of, not that much, that very interesting stuff being greenlit, because
Yeah.
they're risk averse, because a sequel is easier. But in all things, if you're communicating that shorthand of I'm a pro, if you hand me a big bag of money, I'm not going to spend it on the most ridiculous things. I'm going to get you a show on the air that's not only going to have you keep your job, it's going to get you promoted.
Right. Well, and certainly like the actor side of me, who is also a writer, likes to have the words in my mouth, in my bones,
Mm-hmm.
in my body, so that it's not kind of foreign and I'm grabbing for things. I'm not as great off the cuff as I am with rhythms and things that I know that kind of my body knows where this is going to go next. I kind of know where I'm breathing. I kind of know that I've set up to use words that I won't trip over, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a difference between what you've written and what you say out loud, what words want to bash next to each other with the consonants. That to me is so specific, just because I don't function that way. But there are people
Right.
who are great off the cuff and just need a little bit of an outline. But dear God, don't go in there completely empty handed, because things do happen. Maybe there's telephone calls that are coming in and they need to take, and you suddenly go, we were, sorry, what? You don't want to have that
Right.
of just completely going up, and losing your train of thought or getting stuck on something shiny if somebody's passing through. You want to be able to say, "Oh, great. Yep, that happened. Okay, cool. Right." So, as for the tone, we're still on board,
Exactly. Because guess
because
what? You might lose your place. You
yep.
might forget what you're talking about in the middle of your sentence. And if it's in front of you, great. You can pick right back up. That's also why I color code stuff, because if I know I'm reading purple, I can go find the purple on my page.
Yes. Yes. Oh, Carlo, I feel like we are. This is fantastic. How are you finding right now that pitching virtually is different than being in the room? Because we've
Yeah,
kind of
it's
pivoted up to a lot of that now, a lot of this.
right. It's funny when I talk to people who aren't in the industry, there's an expectation that like I'm already back pitching in rooms and stuff, and I'm like, oh no, like that's still a
Oh, no,
long
no.
ways off,
Yeah.
right? So pitching virtually is definitely the norm, is going to stay the norm for a while, if not permanently.
Yeah.
Um, but the big differences that I've observed are, number one, you're able to have your outline and everything right up there on screen. Nobody's judging you for reading right off of it. That's a
Yep.
huge bonus, a huge, easy thing for you to have to be able to stay on pace, stay on track. I've
Mhm.
also noticed that there's a lot more in terms of like multimedia presentations,
Right.
because when you're going in and you're pitching, it can be pretty boring to stare at somebody's face just talking at you for 20 minutes. So the
Mhm.
norm, more and more, and it was already heading this way, and I think COVID just accelerated it, is to have some kind of presentation up with you while you're talking, whether you're running it, you have an assistant, a producer, somebody else running it for you, but some type of keynote to keep the executive's attention, and also to highlight like the specifics of what you're pitching.
Right.
And I think that that's something that I've definitely observed. It's definitely also given me a huge uptick on my business side of like, I make pitch decks, I make in-room presentations. That's what my company does. And so in the last, I would say, 3 to 4 months, we've just, as more people are pitching, I've seen a huge just uptick in people needing those kinds of resources, because ultimately, even if you're not doing it, the person that they're deciding between the two of you, the other person's doing it.
Right. Right. And I think there's something to be said if people go through and just Google like pitch decks. I know there's one. There's a TV series in Bibles that comes up that has Montauk, which was originally Stranger Things. You can see why it pops. You can see
Hmm.
why the kind of layout of the page, the all the graphic design that goes above. Here's my blue background and my white writing, and there's no pictures and it's kind of dull. You can see why, what makes something pop, by looking at other pitch decks to understand why you want that to level up. and maybe that's something that you need to budget for or whatever. But if anybody wants to find your company, where do they want to go to see rates if they ever need a pitch deck and go, please God, Carlo, help me with this?
Absolutely. So super simple. It's Maranty.com, Maranty. I named it after my grandfather's boat.
Aw,
But all the info is right up there. And
mhm.
to just bumping off of that, the backstory of the whole company is, for years, my grandfather was a salesman. He was broke through his whole life, always had a dream of one day owning a boat, eventually saved up enough money, named it after his three kids, Marcia, Anita, and Marty, aka
Aw,
Maranty. And so that's what I wanted the company to be. I wanted it to be a way for people to take that idea that's been sitting in your head for years and years, that you want to turn into something that you want to make into a TV show. And I want to be the means by which you can take that from idea into reality.
of course. And it's something that, there are plenty of different apps and things out there where you can kind of build your own if that's something that is in your skill set or you can teach for yourself. But it definitely does show, same way that having quality sound and having quality film will offset your proof of concept, where people will tune out immediately if the sound is grainy. It's the same thing with the pitch deck. If it doesn't look professional, it's not going to get very far in the consideration, even if it's amazing, because people don't have time to tinker with things that don't look like they're meeting that professional standard.
Exactly. And to that point, I think also one of the things that I tell a lot of prospective clients, we're dealing in a creative industry. And so a lot of people that are coming to me have made pitch decks for themselves or have made lookbooks for themselves in the past. And what I tell them is like, you probably have the ability to do that,
Mhm.
but I've been doing this specifically for years and years. And
Yeah.
so while I'm building your pitch deck, you can focus on the 800 other things that you need to
Yeah.
do for your show, because
Yeah.
you're going to have to choose which of these you spend your time on. And Lord knows, graphic design is one of the most time consuming elements of it.
It
And
really is.
so if I can take that off of your plate, you're then creating an unfair advantage for yourself, where you're able to focus on the things that you're good at, passing the thing that you're okay at, or perhaps not good at all at, to somebody
Right.
who is actually good at that. And that's something
Absolutely.
that I hit over and over again with my clients, is like, number one, identify the thing that you're good at and that you're better than anybody else at. Identify the thing you suck at and that you have no interest in getting better at. And then identify the thing that you're like, I suck at that, but I'm willing to take the time to learn how to get better.
Yeah, and for the one in the middle, find someone you can pay at a reasonable rate to do
Exactly.
that thing, because it's always gonna pay off in terms of your confidence of walking in the room, of not like, "Well, I cobbled this together on XYZ platform." I mean, I know Canva and Google Sheets and things like that can work, but it can be very intricate, and the difference between a kind of first stab and a polished version might be you getting someone to bring you into the room, virtual or not, to talk to you. Can we talk about
Exactly.
length a little bit in terms of what is acceptable? I know there's some confusion with what a pitch deck is versus a series Bible and things like that, or a lookbook. But in terms of the thing not being 100 pages, because
Right.
it's every image that struck me. Let's look through this novel of my ideas. Would you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're thinking about a pitch deck, so here's a general rule of thumb. Pitch deck is more words, lookbook is more pictures. They're both going to have plenty of them, but that, on the spectrum of them, lookbooks, that's why lookbooks tend to be more for directors than for writers or creators who are pitching a full series.
Mhm.
Um, but you're looking probably in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 pages. Um, it can be shorter, it can be a little bit longer, but not too much, because I've had this right, I've had this experience as an exec where, like, if I get a pitch deck and it's 45 pages, my first thought is, oh, and I'm
It's
gonna
a
have
red
to go through that whole thing. And the whole purpose of having a pitch deck is almost so that an exec can look at that before they look at a script, or in lieu of a script. Because I always tell my clients, uh, if you can hold off on writing a script, or hold off on telling that exec that you've written a script, they might pay you for that script. And you shouldn't skip that step, because you should get paid for every step of work that you're doing.
Yeah.
right? And like when you're thinking about an executive, they're like we said, they're human beings. If I'm looking at two documents and one is a 40-page script that looks like every other 40-page script, and one is a 15 to 20-page pitch deck that pops that like I open it up and it jumps off the screen,
Right.
guess which I'm going to look at first.
Mm-hmm.
And if that pitch deck is killer, great. Now I'm already on your side when I go in and I look at that script,
Yep.
as
It's a
opposed to going in
visual.
cold.
Yeah. We're in a visual
Exactly.
medium to tell these stories. And yes, we want your story to be so compelling that in the talking about it, you could get someone excited. But rather than have them read it, you hope that they could look at it and be struck with the images and start to put the pieces of the story together on their own. The other thing you were mentioning about before about the tech or the virtual element of this, definitely try it out beforehand. If you're on Zoom or you're on
Absolutely.
some other platform to do this, some of them have issues or limitations with being able to share from another screen. So maybe you can share your screen, but that's going to affect everything. Some of them let you do sharing from a separate device, so you could log in from a second device. But definitely, we all know from "Sorry, I can't hear you" all year, and "No, I haven't. You're frozen." Things can definitely go wrong. So you probably want to have all that stuff ready and have tested it out, but also be ready to not use it at all.
Yep. And we've been at this long enough that everyone knows the difference between tech stuff just went haywire on me and I didn't prepare. There's a
Yeah,
huge difference between that and in maybe March of 2020. Maybe we didn't know that difference as well, but we know it now. I know if I'm hearing a pitch from somebody and they've never used a Zoom screen share before and they're trying to figure out how to connect it to Keynote and stuff, that doesn't reflect well on them. If I'm sitting there and all of a sudden like my internet goes completely out or I'm choppy and everything, I'm going to get plenty of leeway from the person on the other side. There's a big difference between, hey, life happens and I didn't prepare.
yeah, absolutely. That's there's a lot of ways that things can go wrong, as we all know. We've had people walk through meetings, and we've had, apartment noises and things like that in the background. So everything you can do to eliminate the potential points of failure will be stacking the deck in your favor for your meeting.
Absolutely. And it's the type of like the reason why I'm talking to you in my living room right now as opposed to the office in my bedroom is because I realize the internet's better there. I
Yeah,
realize the internet is much better in here. You see that TV? There's a router right behind it, and I'm hardwired in. And
yeah,
even then, like I'm getting little blips and stuff. So like you want to minimize the number of those things that happen. Prepare as if the thing is happening. Like that's my number one thing that I give to pitchers of every experience level is rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. If
oh
you're
yeah,
working with a partner, do it over and over again. If you have a slideshow where you guys are bouncing off of cues, run it with the slideshow. One of the shows that I'm pitching right now, like part of our rehearsal experience is we have a video that we play up front, which I almost never recommend, but we worked with the producer who we're working with on that knew all of the specific like codec settings and like everything that you needed to do to get a video to work on Zoom. And so like part of our rehearsal is we run the video. I give him notes on, hey, it was choppy here, it was choppy here, it was choppy here, or it looked great. Then we
hmm,
run through with our keynote. I always use two computers because I'm almost always running the keynote because I'm usually the one that built it.
yeah,
So I have one, my main computer runs the keynote and my camera that's connected to Zoom. And then I have a separate computer that's basically a teleprompter that has my whole outline in front of me, also so that it's right above my camera level.
yeah. Absolutely. This is not a meeting you want to take and try to accomplish both of those things from your phone. We're not
Exactly.
there yet.
Yep. And that's also one thing that like there's a little shorthand that gets conveyed, especially if you're in a pitch. Like if you're in a pitch and you're pitching a show that's we're gonna give you like several $1 million to make. There is a shorthand that gets conveyed when you're on vertical. When
Yeah,
when there when there's little bars on your screen of like, "Ooh, I couldn't really be bothered to set aside time for this, so I'm in my car because I needed to go
right.
get a burger or something."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's setting it all up as though intentional. One of the great things they always say in storytelling, I think, at all, but also in comedy, is like get in late and get out early. Like get
Hmm.
in, jump into talking to them, not jump in as in not read the room, but get to the meat of it, make it succinct, leave them salivating for more details so that they can ask you questions. And then when it's winding down, you can go, great, this was so wonderful. Thanks so much for talking to me, and get out. And then they go, oh, we want more of that. As opposed to,
Absolutely.
yeah, I brought my pajamas. Like, you guys
Right.
just gonna hang for the day, you know?
It goes back to that point of over explaining, of insisting on being understood, of like, no, I've got one more thing, let me tell you this, let me no, I know that you asked a very specific question of, is this main character's name Marie or Mary, but I'm going to go on a 5-minute dissertation about the background of her so that you really understand everything that goes into the character. It's like,
Yeah.
no, man, I got it, I just couldn't hear exactly when you said her name.
Exactly. I mean, and this is like anything else. It's a skill set that you continue to hone, because as we were talking about just
Absolutely.
before we went live, you've been doing this a long time. You've been on both sides of the desk. You still walk the walk. You're still going in and pitching things. So it just becomes a skill that you get better and better at and more concise at.
Absolutely. Like right now I'm in the middle of pitch run on a couple of shows. So last week I had Paramount. Tomorrow I'm pitching a show to Peacock, and then hitting kind of all, fingers crossed. We've that show's going out to Adult Swim. All kind of all the usual animated buyers. But that's one thing that I'm constantly observing is like, nah, this could be better. No, this could be better. Like, I teach this to other people, but I am far from being like, nope, I'm good. Perfect pitcher all the time. Like, I don't need to do my homework. Like, the show I'm pitching right now, we've been working on that pitch, you know, for at least 3 months, probably closer to 6,
Mhm.
specifically on the pitch. Like, and it's, the content was already there. Like, that
Yeah.
stuff was already built out, but the specifics of the pitch, we keep honing it. And I look at where I was maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I thought I'd been pitching for a while. I was running my own animation studio. Like, I knew how to pitch and I thought I was pretty good. And I look at those pitches now and I cringe because I was kind of I was in that middle area that we were talking about where like I've had experience. I know what I'm doing. I know some of the executives when I walk into the room, and then there's a whole other set of problems. Like I was looking at an old pitch that I had, and this is something that comes up a lot for me, is the idea of demonstrating competence. That's why I see what happens with a lot of experienced pitchers is you become really desperate to make sure that executive knows that you're smart and knows that you know the business to the point of hurting the pitch.
Mm,
Violating you end up violating the old Mark Twain rule, which was don't use a $5 word when a 50-cent word will do.
yeah. Yeah.
And that doesn't come up when you're first starting to pitch. That really comes up when you've maybe sold a show, when you've had a couple of things go and you feel like you know it. All of a sudden the meat of your pitch becomes a lot less interesting because you're throwing out too many buzzwords to make sure that, hey, I get the business. I like to use words like content and engagement and
Yeah.
using all these things that make you sound like you belong,
Right.
because you want that person on the other end who's ultimately making the decision to accept you as an equal, to accept you as a peer. So you go above and beyond to demonstrate this competence, to demonstrate like, I am a smart person and I will show you, as opposed to, I made a funny show. Here you go. Let's have fun. Let's talk about this show. Let's get into the
Yeah.
world of this show. It becomes about you, not about the show.
Mhm. Exactly. Exactly, and I thank our audience. I know how to use the word. Our audience. No, I see that energy when you're talking about it, because it's something that is proof of belonging rather than just kind of being in the room and knowing you belong. You're showing you belong,
Hmm.
right? It's the same in any of the rooms that we go in, whether you're an actor or a writer or meeting with execs or directors. You want to say, "Hey, I'm here. This is a dialogue that we're participating in together. We're on the same level," as opposed to, "Please let me show you that I've done my homework." For my
Right.
first SAT word, I will use.
Exactly. I'll give you a real textbook example that's from back in the day when we were pitching Most Popular Girls as a TV show. Um, so this was probably, I want to say, like 3 or 4 years ago when we were taking this out everywhere. We have one character, Brittany, who's one of the popular characters. And so in describing the characters, I had two different phrases. One that is a perfect picture of demonstrating competence, and one that is a dumbed down version of this one actually works. Of again, a little bit blue, but the first way that I described it was Brittany has zero impulse control, and this manifests itself in one of two primary ways: violence and sexuality. Boy, that sounded smart. That sounded super
Yep.
smart. But guess what? It's not going to sell an animated like South Park style show. And the
Yeah.
and the line that followed it up said everything. And we didn't need the first line. The line that followed it up was Brittany's here to do two things: kick ass and give hand jobs. And she's already given most of the guys hand jobs. Guess
Right.
what? You know that character. You understand that character from that in a way that that first line that sounded way smarter and made me sound way more couth, uh,
Yes.
it doesn't get the point across, and so
Right.
you want to maintain those 50-cent words that work better than the $5 words.
Exactly. Exactly. Sometimes a generous edit is making it more simple rather than more complex and more textured and more, I don't even know what else, more complicated to be able to
Hmm.
say, "Ooh, it's got shades of this and this and this," and then suddenly they're like, I don't really know who that is. When you
Lost the thread
say
of it,
she's to kick ass and give blowjobs, that is very clear.
right? You're like, okay, I get this character. Or like another good example that I see a lot. I don't know why it's a trend or a buzzword, but using the word genre as this catch-all of like, we really want to elevate the genre world, as opposed to saying like, we love horror movies, we wanted to make a funny horror movie, or we love fantasy stories. Like, if for some reason people are falling a lot on the word genre, and it's that catchy kind of buzzword type thing that makes you sound smart, like like you're wearing a half zip pullover
Yeah.
at some kind of Silicon Valley conference. But ultimately, it makes me understand your show less.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely, and it's the kind of thing where, like, in practice, tape yourself and watch yourself back. Where do you stop paying attention and you know the story? Or where does someone that
Hmm.
you're practice pitching to go, "Yeah, I got a little fuzzy in there, we got in the weeds on the kind of work that they do, and it got a little bit more about plot points than it did story world. So we don't need
Right.
to cover all of that. We get it. He goes to the DMV, and then he goes to the coffee shop, and then we don't need to know all that." So test it, poke holes in it, try it out, and not to the point of feeling like you've done this amazing thing and you've shown it to 30 people. Have it be a trusted circle of people to kind of keep you accountable and make sure that you do the same for them.
Absolutely. Like that's a huge thing. If you have a circle of people that you can hit up and go, "Hey, I got a pitch. I just need some eyes on it. Tell me what you think." Like, I'll either I'll return the favor when it's your turn, or I'll buy you dinner, whatever. Like, that is a huge thing. Get it in front of different eyes. That was a big when I had my animation studio, that was one rule that we always had: is everybody that works for us gets to see the pitch and gets to give us notes. He used to say,
Mhm.
"Hey, and we would go in asking specific questions afterwards of like, did this element come through clearly to you, from our most senior animators and executives all the way down to the interns?"
Right. And there are opportunities like at the festival, places like that where you can try things out, places like the Institute where you can do it in community and you can come through multiple times and be able to book an appointment and have different creators give different perspectives. People who are directors or people who are actors can kind of weigh in from their own perspective, and you take that with a little bit of a grain of salt just from what their perspective might be on the piece. If a director might be looking for more of the tone, an actor might be looking for more of the character. You never know what that's going to be, but it's certainly helpful information. But I think at the end of the day, the great question before anybody starts to go down this road, definitely know if the person is already in your circle. It's not the kind of thing that you want to knock on someone like Carlo's door and ask, "Can you do this for free?" That's not a
Right.
thing. It has to be people who you know and trust and who you could barter and trade favors for, as opposed to knocking on the door, "Hey, can you please help me improve my script or help me improve my
Exactly.
pitch?" When this is what you do for a
Yep.
living.
That's that type of email will get a very polite, "Awesome, sounds good. Here's my rate sheet. Let me know
Yep,
when you want to get started."
exactly, exactly. So definitely worth keeping in mind. If somebody is a trusted friend, that's great, and you can certainly ask, but you'll know if that door is open or not, or if it would be an ask and a favor. And again, those are triggers that only get to get pulled once. And so you probably want to wait till you have a relationship with somebody first. I cannot believe, first of all, how fast time has flown, but we do have
Flew
one more
right
question
by.
if we have time.
Absolutely.
This is from John Adam White, who is saying, appreciate your work on the show. To Carlo, I know you have relationships from your experience. Can you speak to representation and or other formalities in general that are must-haves when it comes to building relationships and encountering opportunities to pitch your work, like having a literary agent? Are you not able to get in to an Apple, a Netflix without some kind of advocate or intermediary?
Right. You're pretty much going to be shut out of those big places if you don't have any kind of rep. Um, there's a reason for that too. I think when you're on the outside of it, it feels really unfair and like a bunch of BS red tape, but it exists for a reason. It exists because as an executive, I have a limited amount of time. I already have too many scripts to read. So I need to have some way to vet people who are coming through. If I'm opening up every random email that gets sent to me, I'm not gonna have time to do my regular work. And on top of that, there's the added element of it opens your company up to liability for, like if you make something that's similar or you already have something similar in development, which happens all the freaking time. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but when it comes to finding representation and all of that kind of stuff, there are avenues like Catalyst where you can begin to build that network and begin to grow those relationships. And if you're at a point where you don't have a rep at all, the thing that you can do is build the relationships through places like Catalyst, going to festivals, putting yourself out there, getting into screenwriter groups, just getting your voice out there as much as possible, creating, making, being a good person, meeting
Mm-hmm.
people. And the encouragement that I always give people is the example of myself, of an agent showed up when it was time. Of
Mm,
I focused on writing, I focused on doing a crap ton of improv, of
mhm,
just getting really good at my craft.
yeah.
Then we put Most Popular Girls online a little over 10 years ago now, and that thing popped, and then all of a sudden I was getting offers from agents, and I didn't have to go sending out cold emails being like, please read this, please read this. Um, I focused on getting really good instead of focusing on the business stuff that would take up just as much of my time, but would not leave me with that skill set that I needed when the time came. And so
Mhm,
the thing to do is to open yourself up to those networks like Catalyst, where you can meet other people, where you can work on those pitching skills. And then when the time is right, an agent's going to show up. A manager's
mhm.
going to show up. A huge piece of advice I got was agents follow heat. So if you have
Yes.
heat on you, guess what? An agent's going to find you. And also, if you
Mhm.
don't have, if an agent isn't calling you right now and you need one, don't take it personally. They follow heat. Go get some heat on yourself. Right? Just keep making stuff. Figure out ways to put it out into the world and let that happen because you don't. When Most Popular Girls first hit, I would have younger writers and stuff, people reaching out to me being like, hey, come on my YouTube channel, come do this because that'll spike my views and everything. And it's like I would tell them, I was like, you don't want to be in a position where you're asking me, you want to be in the position where I'm asking you, because I'm not going to pop your views or your career or anything just on my name alone. But if I'm reaching out to you and saying we should do something together, that's because I know that we can make something that's actually going to have some meat on it, that's actually
Mhm.
going to be able to be viewed by people. And it works the same way. Like, it's a lot easier to say yes to an agent who has asked for a meeting with you than an agent that you have just battered down saying like, please take a meeting, please take a meeting, please take a meeting. Let your work speak for
Yes.
itself. Get good at that stuff.
Right, and I think there's kind of a misconception sometimes that the only buzz is a booking or an award or a win, but the middle steps, like getting pinned for something as an actor, okay, I didn't book that, but I got pinned, and that meant I was in with the producers. So do you want to meet with me because I'm currently pinned? Like your timing of when you tell people, "Oh, I'm going to go in that room again." Did you want to talk with me before I go in that room? Sometimes it's
Mhm.
just the fumes of an opportunity that people are like, "Oh, yes, I'm listening," as opposed
Yep.
to, "Oh, last month I was pinned for that thing, and now it's over, and I'm jobless like everyone else," right? Strike while the
Exactly. And stop predicting what's going to be the thing and running after that, because here's my story. My story was I spent years and years in the back of UCB watching everything that I could, going there, watching four shows a night over and over again, getting really good at writing sketch, getting really good at improv.
Mhm.
And then Most Popular Girls was a sketch that I put up live. A buddy came up to me and said, "Let's shoot it with Barbies." We put it on YouTube. Didn't expect anybody to watch it. And that was the thing that hit. You don't get to decide the thing that hits. Your job is to just get good at your thing so that when that moment shows up, you're ready.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important, and I think there's one other thing to keep in mind before we go, which is you can also reverse engineer. Say you have a thing that you are looking to shoot, or you've got a script that's really ready, and you know that for you as an example, Carlo as a producer is the person who has an overall deal at the network that I know where this show belongs. I've done all my homework. How am I trying to connect with an agent or a manager that is connected to that person so that I'm reverse engineering where I want to land, which is Apple, say that that's where my show goes.
Hmm.
If Carlo has an overall deal with Apple, then I'm working my way backwards to where who I need to talk to, as opposed to trying to blanket town with my information and hoping something catches because it invariably won't be the right connector to Apple, right?
Right? Like you put that so perfectly. It's so much a matter of focusing on your own thing, getting good at it, doing your homework and going, "Oh, this person's over here, this person's over here. let me
Mhm.
you know let me put myself in a position where we can work together," as opposed to like, "I'm just going to hit them up and I know my thing is the best. I'm
Yeah.
going to bombard them until they say yes." That's not the way to go about it. The way to go about it is be about your business, get good, and then all of a sudden, magically, things start showing up, especially when you open yourself up to places like Catalyst. You start putting yourself out there in the community, taking advantage of every opportunity that you can, whether it's to pitch something, whether it's to produce something, and find other people who are of a like mind with you.
Yeah.
Like one of the big things for me was when I was in sketch and improv. I don't put a camera in my hand because I am a disaster with it. I can write, I can perform. And so
Mhm.
I found the people who were good at editing and who were good at shooting. And
Mhm.
ultimately that was who I started a business with. You know,
Yeah.
that was the thing of like I'm going like, "Oh, you're good at this, I'm good at this. Let's work together."
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the thing is once you start doing that and once you start working with the people who are, oh, this is definitely the camera person for who I work with. Once you start to find that community of people that you have a shorthand with, going into pitch becomes even better because you know that you can tee up somebody else and they can take it from you and run with it. And obviously you've rehearsed all of that, but then it becomes a flow and it's a shared thing as opposed to you in front of a room full of eyes all alone
Right?
feeling like prey.
Exactly, and you really can't predict how those relationships are going to unfold. Like right now, two of the shows that I'm taking out right now, I'm like I'm working with a writer on multiple projects who I met in an improv group 12 or 13 years ago. And
Love
when
it.
I was an exec, she was always my first call because I was like, I know Haley will be able to handle this.
Mhm.
And like there's no substitute for those years, for that time of just building a friendship.
Absolutely.
And that's always some of the most difficult advice to give, because you just kind of have to wait and keep doing it.
Yep. Absolutely. Carlo, thank you so much. It's
My
always wonderful to talk
pleasure,
to you,
thank you.
and I know we could do this all day, and we will.
Right. Flew
Keep your
by.
eyes peeled. Yeah, keep your eyes peeled for the spring, everyone. We'll be bringing you a next level version of the Pitch World series, and we look forward to doing that. Thank you both to Jonathan and oh no, to John, Adam White, and to Joshua. And we appreciate you being here. We look forward to seeing what you do next.
Awesome, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Carlo. We'll see you soon.
All right, take care, have a good one.
You too.
Bye.